So, what if I told you that one man, just one single person, was responsible for two of the biggest environmental disasters of the entire 20th century? No, this isn't science fiction. It's the absolutely true story of a brilliant inventor whose solutions to everyday problems would end up poisoning our bodies and, quite literally, tearing a hole in the sky. Just let that sink in for a second. More impact on our planet's atmosphere than any other single organism in history. We're not talking about a volcano or an entire species. We're talking about one guy, a chemist named Thomas Midgley Jr. So how on earth does that even happen? Well, let's get into it. And that right there is the central question we're going to try and unpack today. See, this isn't a simple story about some villain with a master plan to ruin the world. Nope. This is about a celebrated genius, a master problem solver, and the catastrophic, completely unforeseen consequences of his work. It is, seriously, a cautionary tale of the highest order. Okay, so our story kicks off in the early 1920s. The age of the automobile is just dawning, but there's this one huge problem that's holding everything back. It was something driving engineers at General Motors absolutely nuts, a little thing called engine knock. I want you to imagine you're driving one of those early cars, right? You hit the gas, but instead of that smooth acceleration we know, you hear this awful rattling, this pinging sound coming from under the hood. That's engine knock. It was terrible. It choked engines of their power and could literally shake them to pieces from the inside out. Fixing this wasn't just some small improvement. It was the key to unlocking the future of powerful, efficient cars. So, General Motors puts their guy, Thomas Midgley, on the case, and he attacks this problem with pure scientific dedication. This guy wasn't just guessing, he was methodical, working his way through the periodic table, testing one compound after another, searching for that perfect magic bullet, an additive that would make gasoline burn just right. He was a relentless problem solver. And then, boom, 1921, he finds it. Tetraethyl lead, or TEL for short. A tiny bit of this stuff, just a few grams in a whole gallon of gas, and the knock was gone. I mean, completely vanished. It was hailed as an absolute miracle. Engines could suddenly be built with higher compression, making them way more powerful and efficient. Thomas Midgley was a hero. But this is exactly where the story takes a very, very dark turn. Because that miracle compound he'd found, well, it was a lead-based chemical. And humanity was about to start pumping it into the air we all breathe on a scale that is just impossible to imagine. 7 million tons. Just try to wrap your head around that number. That's how much lead was vaporized out of car tailpipes and just scattered into the atmosphere in the United States alone. An almost unbelievable amount of a known neurotoxin just invisibly raining down on our cities, our playgrounds, our farms, for decades. And the human cost was just staggering. We know lead is a powerful poison for the brain, especially for kids. Right away, workers in the factories making this stuff started getting horribly sick, hallucinations, insanity, even death. Later studies would link all this lead exposure to a global drop in IQ scores, and maybe even a huge spike in violent crime. And the ultimate irony? Midgley himself got lead poisoning from his own invention and had to take time off to recover. He knew it was dangerous, but the product was just too profitable to stop. Now, you'd think that one invention with a legacy that devastating would be enough for one person's lifetime, right? But Thomas Midgley was not done solving problems. His next target? The kitchen. You know, back before the 1930s, having a refrigerator in your house was a real roll of the dice. The chemicals they used to keep things cold, like ammonia or sulfur dioxide, were super toxic. If your fridge sprang a leak, it could literally kill you and your family in your sleep. So the industry was desperate for a safe alternative. And who do you think they called? Thomas Midgley, of course. And unbelievably, he does it again. He comes up with a brand new man-made compound, the first chlorofluorocarbon, or CFC. The commercial name was Freon. And on the surface, it seemed perfect. It wasn't toxic, it wasn't flammable, it was incredibly stable. For refrigeration, it was an absolute dream come true. Once again, Midgley delivered a miracle. And to show everyone just how safe this new stuff was, Midgley performed this legendary stunt at a big chemistry conference. He took a huge lungful of this invisible gas, held it for a second, and then slowly breathed it out over a lit candle, putting the flame out. Can you imagine? The crowd was floored. It was pure showmanship, and it proved just how much confidence he had in his creation. And so, history repeated itself. A brilliant solution for an immediate, dangerous problem ended up creating a slow-motion, global catastrophe that absolutely no one saw coming. Because that wonderfully stable, non-toxic gas had a really dark secret. See, the very thing that made CFCs seem perfect, their incredible stability, well, that turned out to be their fatal flaw. They just don't break down here on the ground. Instead, over decades, they float all the way up into the stratosphere. And way up there, the sun's intense UV rays finally blast them apart, which releases chlorine atoms. And it turns out a single chlorine atom acts like a tiny chemical buzzsaw, destroying over 100,000 molecules of ozone, which is our planet's essential sunscreen. And just like with leaded gas, the use of CFCs just exploded. You can see on this chart it went from basically nothing in the 30s to almost 1 million tons a year by the 1970s. It was everywhere, in our fridges, our air conditioners, even our hairspray cans. That infamous hole in the sky over Antarctica, that was the direct result of Midgley's safe gas. So here we are, we've got lead baked into our soil and a hole in our ozone layer, and both of these global crises can be traced right back to the work of this one man. It's a legacy that's almost too wild to believe, and it all ends with one final tragic twist of irony. In 1940, Midgley contracted polio, which left him severely disabled. But he was an inventor to the very end. So he designed this complex system of ropes and pulleys to help him get out of bed. Then, in 1944, at just 55 years old, he got tangled up in his own device and was accidentally strangled to death. The man who invented so many things was ultimately killed by his own invention. And that, right there, is the heart of this whole story. Thomas Midgley was a genius at solving the problem that was right in front of him. But he, and the companies that made billions from his work, had a catastrophic blind spot for what would happen next. His legacy is the ultimate terrifying example of what can happen when we solve for now without ever thinking about later. And that leaves all of us with a really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? We celebrate innovation all the time, but Midgley's story forces us to stop and ask, what is our generation's leaded gasoline? What's the miracle solution we're all embracing today that's creating a quiet disaster for tomorrow? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.